Hey, what's up everybody? This is Passion 9, and lately I've been playing Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. The latest Zelda game. I'm finally playing it after 3 years of hearing about how it's completely uh, redefined the Zelda franchise. It's kind of like a fresh start, a reboot with very different, style, totally open world. And I'm finally playing it, and I got some mixed feelings, honestly. I feel like the Legend of Zelda series, thinking back on it retrospectively, has always kind of gotten away from me. It's never been a franchise that I've got on with completely. You know what I mean? Outside of Wind Waker, which was and still is my favorite Zelda game. It's the one that I think, although it was very light on challenge, it was a pretty easy game compared to other Zeldas. I found it really charming. I liked the ocean world, and I just found that to be a smooth experience. But most Zelda games I've played, Ocarina, Twilight Princess, I finished Twilight Princess, but not Ocarina of Time. So, most Zelda games, I get into them and I'm just like, yeah, there's just, the combat's usually okay, it's fine, and it's usually the puzzles that have the most challenge. That's where most of your challenge and sustenance is coming in. And Breath of the Wild, as it turns out, is no exception there because there are lots of puzzles. Like the game is, when it comes to the challenge, mostly puzzle solving. There are dozens and dozens of shrines littered all over the open world that you find, and you enter them, and you have a big puzzle to solve. And at first I thought, okay, that's not a bad idea because, I mean, if you're doing a world this big that you get to explore out in the open, you know, you don't necessarily want just a few main dungeons like the original games. You know, you complete one of these shrines, you get something that can upgrade your hearts or your stamina, but the puzzles in there, much like most Zelda games, are just like fiendishly difficult for me. Like I've finished a couple here and there, but it's like every time I find a new shrine now, there's a little bit of dread because I'm just like, I can't figure this shit out. Like there are these sterile, very kind of plain looking dungeons, and I sometimes it's pretty clear that like you're using your base powers, the magnesis and the ice blocks and all that stuff, your bombs, to solve these dungeons. It's usually those core powers, and I still find it really difficult to solve the puzzles. I don't know what it is with Zelda puzzles, but I've always found them more difficult than the puzzle solving in most games. Even though, you know, I do like puzzle solving in video games. I've played old horror games like Resident Evil and Silent Hill, Tomb Raider, Portal, you name it. Like, I like me some puzzle solving, but there's just something about Zelda puzzles that I always find myself getting stuck with. Even with Twilight Princess, it was like, finished that one, but I remember struggling a lot on the puzzles. And that's back when you had like one main solution. The thing about this game is that the puzzle solving can sometimes have multiple solutions, and they can be very creative solutions if you really know how to think outside the box of these puzzles, because a lot of times they might not even tip you off very much. It's just like you really have to figure out what to do. Like, it's not always so obvious that, like, for example, you can use your ice power to create a block underneath a gate to lift it open. It's like, oh, I can do that now. Like, that's the kind of game this is. You really have to be pretty creative in your solutions and your problem solvings, in a way that most video games don't usually account for. So it's, yeah, I've been struggling with some of the shrines, and the combat is, I think, actually the worst in any Zelda game I've played before. It's not very good. I feel like ever since Nier Automata, ever since I played that, it's like, I know that's Platinum Games, but I can't stand like lax or just mediocre combat in a big sprawling open world game. Like, I find that tough. So the combat I usually just try to avoid, which you can most of the time in this game because it's open ended. And it's like, yeah, your weapons degrade super fast and they break all the time, and the combat itself is just super clunky. I feel it's not. It feels very fumbly. It feels very clumsy, and I'm always pressing the wrong button to attack and to putting it away, and it's like, I don't like the combat either, and that's never been a strong suit of Zelda to begin with. But in Wind Waker, it's like all of that was so smooth, all of that was so, uh, you know, easy to get through, and the game was so charming that I was like, yeah, thinking back on it, that's still my favorite Zelda because the core features in those games, the combat and the puzzles in Wind Waker were just like, yeah, it's not that complex, it's not that hard. I never found myself getting stuck in that game, really. But that's also why I liked it so much, because ultimately, any of the more challenging Zelda games I play, I feel like I'm getting stuck for way too long, frequently, on the puzzles, and not enjoying the combat enough for that to, like, make up for it, because, again, that's rarely the best part of a Zelda game, and Breath of the Wild, I will say, the exploration, the world itself, the climbing, all that stuff, is super cool. I do like how open-ended and epic that feels. And so far, that's kind of the thing that's keeping me playing, is just like having those core abilities and messing around with stuff in the world does make this game super fun to play. It's definitely different from any other open world game I've played and what it lets you get away with the physics and interacting with the world. But that's kind of all I'm getting out of it so far. I feel like the shrines are a little bit hit or miss. I'm not crazy sold on those. Um, and I'm not super into the combat either, especially after my first boss fight, which I thought was pretty terrible. Not necessarily hard, but the combat's so clunky that I just didn't enjoy it. And again, the dungeons are mostly very samey now. They're not like the themed dungeons you had in the other Zelda games. So they can get, I could see them getting a little repetitive maybe, even the ones that I can solve. So I'm a bit mixed on it, but I'm also starting to think that in general, when it comes to a challenging Zelda game, it's usually the puzzle solving, and I kind of suck at that. I think I just suck at Zelda. So I think that doesn't help matters. I think Wind Waker will always be the one for me. Uh, but otherwise, I will keep playing it. I want to say, well, I don't know if I should say a quarter of the way through, because the thing's probably long as hell. But I'm a ways through. I made it through the first major dungeon. There's like 3 major dungeons you do get to complete in the game, 3 or 4 of them, and they take a while to get to. And the shrines are everything you find along the way. So I will keep playing it. It is neat, and I guess that's it. Maybe there's hope for me once again completing a Zelda game for the first time in a while, because it's never been a franchise that I've grinded through, installment after installment the way a lot of people have. Even A Link to the Past. Like, I tried it. I'm just like, yeah, it's just not for me. I'm not into this. I need something where maybe the combat's a little better and the puzzle solving's a little lighter. Don't know, but we'll see how things go. For now, I think it's neat. It's a neat game. It's one of my early Switch experiences. I'm looking forward to seeing what more it has to offer, even if so far the core of this game is frustrating me quite a bit here and there. Like, the puzzle solving is sometimes too obtuse for me, and the combat is, it's just clunky. So we'll see how far I go. But until next time, live for the passion.